It's weird to think that the last mainline Story of Seasons game that we got was back in 2021, as we enter the second half of 2024. And before that, the last mainline entry was in 2017. It seems like Marvelous has been keen on using remakes to pad out their release schedule between mainline entries, and considering we are probably on the eve of another mainline announcement, or at the bare minimum, another remake, I think it's finally time for me to sit down and talk about the latest mainline entry, Pioneers of Olivetown, or how XSEED affectionately calls it, Poot. Pioneers of Olivetown is a very weird entry into the series. It marked the return of the first mainline Story of Seasons entry on a home console since Animal Parade back in 2008. Since then, the series had more or less been exclusively moved to DS and 3DS entries. So a lot was riding on this return to home hardware, and well, to say it released undercooked on the Nintendo Switch, well, is a bit of an understatement. When Poot launched originally, the game ran very poorly, the frame rate was all over the place, visually the game looked a bit ugly at times, and it overall had the feeling of an early access release, and for all intents and purposes, it kind of was. This game was definitely released too early for its own good, which is a shame because this is one of the few times in which the Western version of the game launched within the same window of time as the Japanese release. If I recall correctly, review keys were going out for Western outlets around the same time the game launched in Japan. Something we sadly have not seen much from Marvelous since. So, outside of performance on the Nintendo Switch, there were a lot of other issues that troubled the game at launch. A lot of these issues sadly came to be core issues with the overall game experience that even 3 years later have not been fully remedied. However, that does not mean the product we have today is the same one that launched on the Switch. Since then, Poot was released on Steam later in 2021, and on PlayStation 4 in 2022. The game even had a roadmap of upcoming quality of life changes, content updates, and DLC to try and bring the game up to the standard of previous mainline entries in the series. And in some regards, this really did breathe some new life into the game, while in others, it really highlighted the root issues the game had. So, I want to be positive and talk about what I have been really enjoying about this game. It must have been doing something right with all the new content now, because over the last weekend, I have sunk in about 20 hours into the game. So, what had me hooked? It was the gameplay loop. Poot's main system relies on expanding a lot of systems introduced in A New Beginning on the 3DS and taking it up to a 10. While I consider Story of Seasons 2015 and Trio of Towns to be two of the best games in the series, we find the true evolution of A New Beginning's core mechanics here with its expansion on the Maker systems and its level of customization. However, when it comes to customization, you are limited to your pretty sizable farmland, which is, in fairness, bigger than all of Olivetown. And for the Makers, well, the game really likes to focus on the Makers in this game, having a huge reliance on taking raw materials and making finished goods with them. You will be performing a dance between getting raw materials and processing them into finished goods to create new facilities around your farm to produce more raw materials. On paper, this cycle is very addicting, and in practice, yeah, it's pretty addicting. And once you fall into the loop, you can almost find a type of zen going through everything as you try and build up your farm. The only issue is that the Makers do not instantly produce goods, and every item has a timer on how long it will take to convert the raw materials. This could take anywhere from a few in-game hours to an entire in-game day. The higher the tier of the good, the longer it will take. So, you'll want to have dedicated areas on your farm for multiple makers of the same type to have a steady stream of finished goods to use around your farm. You will not be getting away with building only one ingot and one plank maker. I mean, you could. I just wouldn't advise it, because, well, you won't have that much fun. When I got into my full groove, I had about 10 of each constantly outputting goods. There is pretty much a maker for anything that you may need to create higher tier items, cosmetics, or gifts for people in town. So creating a system that works for you will be key to having a steady supply of materials to upgrade your farm. You can also automate your raw resource gathering by befriending nature sprites, cute little creatures you find while farming. They will passively gather you different raw materials based on their leaders. So if you are in need of specifics, never fear, as you can grind them in the background while doing other things. This is where we get the first big quality of life upgrade from the original release. When the game came out, makers could only store and produce one item at a time. It wasn't until a later update where you could queue up to 10 items to be produced over time. So if you're not keeping tabs on when items are being completed, you would actually be wasting time. I am not sure who thought this was a good idea, but this was a major turnoff for me for the entire maker system as a whole. Being able to have several makers all have full queues producing items while I spent the day in the mines, tending to the fields or clearing out more land was the quality of life improvement I needed the most. In terms of farming space, you arguably have the most farmable land the series has ever given you in one continuous place. Nearly the entire south side of the map you are on is your oyster to develop into a thriving farm. While it may seem daunting at first, it is divided into sections that you will unlock as you get the hang of the game's systems. You can put facilities anywhere you want and place fields for crops wherever you want as well. The only issue I ran into is that if you do not develop the land, it is very easy for it to become overgrown again. This can be a problem when it can take multiple days to build the development you're looking for. So you can spend a day clearing out an area and come back only to find more rocks, trees growing again, and more weeds to slow you down. On the one hand, this is needed because you will get plenty of raw materials for processing goods. But on the other hand, I did find it a bit overwhelming at times to clear out areas, only to find my animals boxed in again later when I tried to get them to go out to graze. So it's best to develop the land you'll want to use with roads, makers, and facilities to keep the overgrowth in check. What makes this Story of Seasons entry different from others is the fact you don't always need money to buy the things you need. Sometimes you'll just find wild cows, chickens, and sheep that you can tame for free of charge as long as you have the space for them. Most of the time though, through the overgrowth you'll run into broken facilities that you can fix at the price of raw materials and finished goods to bring them up to speed instead of having to spend for them. This created a natural sense of progression through the farmland, as the deeper I went into it, the higher level of goods you needed. So when I ran into things that were asking for way too much, I knew to take a step back and focus on what was in front of me at the time. Then when it comes to tending to your fields, the game introduces some forms of automation through many items you can craft. Once you get things in gear, you can have your fields always watered while you are focused on doing other things, such as mining. The final farming thing I want to talk about are the mines and your tools. Pooch has a traditional upgrade system that most Story of Seasons fans are familiar with. You go to the mines, get your ores, with the added step of processing them into metal bars, take them to the smith, and you got yourself upgrades. Tool upgrades feel really nice, and every level makes you feel more powerful than the last. There is nothing more satisfying than fully charging up my axe or hammer and clearing out an entire section of a mine or a large swath of trees. Items also magnetize to you, so collecting everything becomes seamless. The only issue I have is that the game doesn't have a dedicated active toolbar for your tools like previous games. Your tool bag is always with you, and you have to constantly swap tools in and out of it manually to make room for other items. This is a major issue for the game because it always feels like you never have enough storage space on hand. I really want to know who at Marvelous thought this shared inventory was a good idea. I just feel like this was an overlooked quality of life issue that was never resolved in one of the major updates. So in terms of the core farming gameplay, Pooch really delivers with a lot of changes added to the game. There are probably a lot I'm missing too because so much was added over the course of time. Sadly though, it feels like they put their entire focus of this game on the farming side and not all too much on the social side of the game. With Pooch, the game has the crime of having some really good character designs, but having all of the characters be, well, as shallow as a puddle. Olive Town has an interesting cast of characters that the game really does nothing with. There is a plot going on in the background of the game where you're trying to revitalize the land and bring back all of the spirits to it, and try to put Olive Town on the map, but the game never really does anything with it. The town events are very short and sometimes feel more like a nuisance than any actual progression. It doesn't matter how good or cool characters here may seem, they are all written so poorly, to the point where some of them are indistinguishable from the unnamed tourist NPCs that show up. Character writing has always been an important part of Story of Seasons to me. Your farm was always meant to be in service of the people living around you, but here it just feels like I'm living alone in a town filled with shadows. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit depressing to think back on the previous entries on the 3DS and remember how good some of the character writing was, only for it to nearly be non-existent here. It was so bad I felt no desire to befriend any of the townsfolk to even get to know a lot of their stories. And the ones I did get to learn about, they were, well, all pretty boring. Characters rarely discuss anything new and repeat the same type of messages over and over again, day in and day out. On top of that, they wander around like they're mindless zombies until they have to go to their scheduled posts. There's no rhyme or reason to any of their movements. Olive Town has more pressing issues, and the lack of tourism is not one of them. Oh, and did I forget to mention the game launched with almost no real festivals? Yeah, it was dire. Thankfully, minigame festivals were added, and some life could be felt in them, but overall it just felt cold. To remedy a lot of the poor characters, the game added character DLC where villagers from A New Beginning, 2015, and Trio of Towns moved into, islands off the coast of Olive Town. You can take a boat to visit them, and for the most part, a lot of them keep their charm from the original releases, with their character events feeling more filled with life than those from the people of the mainland. So much so that I went back to my roots and romanced Felicia, the love of my life from my A New Beginning playthrough. Sadly, even with familiar, there was still a sterile feeling from these characters, almost as if the core writing of the game was just bringing everything down. Sadly, that's not even the worst part. The DLC characters never take part in the happenings of Olive Town, and they are truly just in their own world. They won't attend festivals or be seen walking around town. The best you get is them visiting your farm to take you to their respective islands for their character events. It is honestly really depressing, and makes me think that if more time was put in developing memorable characters, this could have been one of the best games in the entire franchise. The final thing we need to address is the performance. I played this game on Switch, and let me tell you, it was awful. Worse than Rune Factory 5 at times. But, just like Rune Factory 5, all these issues were resolved once the games got to new hardware. Playing this on my PC allowed me to play this at 1440p and 60 frames per second, no issue. It can run at a higher frame rate, but I felt 60 was the sweet spot for performance and visuals. Also, the game looks much more vibrant and not as muddy as it did on Switch, giving the visuals a nice flair. While it can look sterile at times, there were honestly moments in the game that made me go, yeah, this game looks really nice. In terms of Steam Deck, despite its label, I was able to play the game on it with no issues outside of having to use the keyboard. So for those of you wanting the Switch experience without having to use the Switch, the Steam Deck may be right up your alley for this one. When this game first launched back on Switch, heck, when it was first shown off, my opinion for this game, well, wasn't too great. The game always felt safe, it felt sterile. There were a lot of times that Marvelous was just trying to chase the Animal Crossing New Horizons trend with a lot of its development choices, and I think the game suffered a lot for that originally. The game launched probably nearly a year or two early if the content roadmap was anything to go by. Lack of any good character writing and interactions really held the game back even to this day. Its over-reliance on the Maker system can also be to the game's detriment at times too. That being said, I'd be lying if I didn't admit I actually began enjoying myself playing this game the deeper I got into it and the more I developed my farm. In terms of the strict farming gameplay and the core gameplay loop, this is probably one of the better Story of Seasons games, showing true evolution of a lot of its ideas and mechanics that it established all the way back in 2012. If you are someone who's always been on the fence about this game and don't find the shallow character interactions to be a real problem, I can actually kinda recommend this game to you on PC or PS4, or at the very least I can recommend it to you on sale with all the DLC. I am hoping that with the next mainline entry that they will no doubt announce soon after this video goes up, Marvelous will have learned a lot from their mistakes and create a return to form this series so desperately needs. Or, you know, remake Magical Melody or Animal Parade. I'll take that too. Wow, it's been a while since my last video, huh? Well, I am hoping to get some more videos out to you guys soon. A lot of things have been going on my end in terms of life, work, my health. A lot of things I can't really get into in a video like this right now. But hey, like I said, I am hoping to make some more videos and reviews for you guys in the coming future. I do stream a lot on Twitch if you want to check that out. Link that will be down in the description below. I will like to play a lot of JRPGs like Trails and some other fun games that catch my interests, which will of course include Rune Factory and Story of Seasons. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. What do you guys think of this review? It's been a long time coming on this one. I've been putting it off for years. Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to think. And hey, if you're just finding me out for this review, be sure to subscribe for future reviews, commentaries, and more. I plan to do a lot more coverage on Story of Seasons, Rune Factory, and other niche series that I enjoy. But until then, I got another video review to work on, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have a good day for now.